Do you feel guilty? Yeah, do you feel guilty? Well, about what? I mean, that's up to you. I'm asking the question because I spent years, decades, feeling guilty. And so often I've discovered in other people that they too have felt guilty in their lives over something they had absolutely no control over. Sometimes people feel guilty for not being as good looking as their older or younger siblings. They feel not. They feel like they're put aside because they're not as smart as an older or younger sibling, or even a cousin, or father or mother or grandfather. Maybe they feel guilty because they are angry that the disabled child in the family gets so much attention. Oh boy, that is so common. Some people feel guilty because they are married to someone who they don't want to be with, or they love somebody else. Maybe they feel guilty for having an affair. That they have some control over, usually. Some people really don't. If they've never had love and they find love and they go off and have an affair, this, the hormones are just so strong that you have to be sympathetic at some level. Somebody has to be, anyway. I felt guilty as a child because my parents wanted boys, and especially my mother. It was so incredible. It was such a tough thing to deal with because, excuse me, after me, she had a boy. But he only lived 4 days, and she couldn't have any more because he was Rh negative, and back then they didn't know what to do about that. Now they have some kind of a serum that reverses it. They also have, guess it's actually called a vaccine. Uh, they also have drained the baby's bodies and refilled it with different blood, and that's worked. But in 1949, they just didn't know. They didn't know they could do any of that. And that made me even more guilty because I kept hearing about how Rudy and this and Rudy that, because his name was to be Rudolph. Or his name wasn't Rudolph. They named him when he was born. But then they discovered a way to have made the child live, but it was years later. It's too late for that boy. And yet I've had friends, close friends who really cared about me and said, yeah, but the tables would have turned because if he had lived, you would have always been secondary. You wouldn't have felt guilty. You just would have felt useless. But I felt invisible anyway. So I understand that when someone feels guilty for something they have absolutely no control over, um, there has to be a way to get past that. And there is. You have to find some person or some family member or some friend or some community that sees your value so that you can let go of that guilt. And for some people it takes a therapist. But I feel like many times that's not necessary. You can just find, not just, I make it sound too easy, don't I? It's not that easy. Because you've got to find somebody you trust, a community you trust, a relative you trust, a friend you trust, somebody whose statements about who you are and what you are and how you have lived your life affirms the fact that you shouldn't feel guilty. Now, you can't have somebody just say to you, you shouldn't feel guilty. That doesn't work. Mm-mm. Nope, not at all. Mm-mm. Somebody has to say, you have such value. You're so smart. You're so funny. You're so patient. You're so thoughtful. The way you look at things in life is just such a joy to talk to you because your conversations go off in places I never expected, and you bring up things that are so important in a way that I'm really interested in and fascinated to sit and talk with you. Something like that. has to be said. And it has to be somebody you feel like you can trust, because otherwise you'll just push it off. And believe it or not, I can remember things that my grandfather said to me, not just even with words, but just with his smile. And that was when I was 3, and when I was 5, and when I was 12. That made me know that I was okay. I was okay. And it was good. It was really, really good. And my uncle, I'll bet my uncle didn't say more than 20 words to me in his life. And I adored him. Just adored him. Because he was the son of my grandfather. He made his face and his eyes tell me the truth. And that's what we're looking for here. That's what we're looking for to get you past that guilt, that sense of guilt that you didn't have any choice about. And sometimes there are books or videos or statements or things of that nature that send you in the right direction to look at yourself. Let's say somebody says that you're a lousy artist and your older sibling is a phenomenal artist, and you feel guilty about the fact that you don't have that talent. And yet, maybe what your older sibling does is paint or sculpture. And maybe what you do is macrame or quilting. And finally, you do one, either a macrame or a quilt, that is absolutely stunning. And people go, whoa, we had no idea you were so talented. The same statement that's always made to your older sibling. And then you go, oh, I don't need to feel guilty because I do have talent. One never knows what it's going to be that's going to make the difference, except we do know that it's usually someone outside yourself. Could be a therapist. We never know. If you can find a therapist who you trust and who relates to you well, that could help, but it's hard to say. It's less expensive and easier if you just have someone you've already trusted, who one day, for whatever reason, you're able to fess up. Just confess to them. You know, Sally, I feel guilty because I've let my parents down. Really? What's that about? Wow, I never realized that. And then you say, yeah, you know, my brother's a math whiz and I'm just not. Then Sally says, but you're so good in history. I mean, that paper you wrote, remember? The one the teacher read in front of the class? I mean, it was awesome. Some people are good in math and other people are good in writing. And whoa, you are so good in writing. Now, if you believed her, you're all set. If every time you feel that twinge, that there's some reason you should cower to your older siblings' math abilities, and yet you remember the paper the teacher read in class and the affirmation from your friend, that paper may make no difference whatsoever. Maybe not. It may take more than that. But that may be enough. And it feels so good when you get past that. I can remember year after year after year sitting down across from a therapist, and they'd say, how do you feel? I'd say, guilty. Why? Because I was born female. And then reminded of it every single day by the way my mother treats me. See, that's part of it too. If you're only reminded from time to time, if maybe you have to go to an event where your brother's being awarded an award for your sister for math, that makes a difference because then it's not on you all the time. And that's part of what we have to have going. But remember that everybody's a little. Maybe you are the most phenomenal lyre player that's ever been. Maybe when you first held that lyre and looked at the music sheet, it was just unbelievable how you responded. Everybody has something they do differently, even if it's a disabled child. I don't know if you've ever been around a Down syndrome child, but they have this incredible patience. They are usually happy and they usually have tremendous amounts of patience. And it's just, they're very calming to be around in general. Now, I'm, of course, giving you the stereotype of what they teach us in school when we're studying special education and what I've seen in the real world. That doesn't mean that every single one is going to be exactly the same. But think about that. And that's one thing I just barely touched on, the attention that a disabled child can get in a family can make it very difficult for the other ones, especially if there's a disabled child, an extremely bright child, and one in between. Because the one in between is not sure where they fit in. And especially if the disabled child has a planned helplessness, and that's not unusual for that to happen. And that's where the parents overcompensate for the disability instead of giving the child an opportunity to overcome it at some level. And if that is the case in your family, then there's one thing that you can do, and that's do your best to help the child to overcome it at some level. Because if that happens, despite the fact the parents are sabotaging the child by making him feel worse, that child will feel better. The parents will recognize they don't have as hard a work to support that child, especially the incredible pressure of feeling like they can't take care of him after they die. And you will have the knowledge that you helped the child. So there's a lot of different ways that we can crawl out from under that cloud of feeling guilty. And it's always about being creative. It's about turning the box upside down and looking at the bottom. In other words, when you think about a solution, turn it around and think about a different solution. Continue to search for what you want to find. That is the trick. Search for what you're trying to find, but look in an unconventional way, because so often that's the answer. And usually, not always, but usually it's simpler, because we don't tend to look for the simplest answer first. It's funny that way. We are funny that way. But we tend to make things bigger and harder and more complicated than we need to. And in most cases, simple is the best. So good luck with that. If you got any questions, answer me right down below. And while you're down there, look at our nonprofit. Several people and I have worked together for 34 years to help others. And now I hope I've done that, or I'm starting to do that on videos. Thank you.